I used to be a Republican. Really, I was. I like a lot of Republican ideas. Republicans say that foremost, they just want the government out of their business. That's reasonable. We all know what a burdensome mess government bureaucracy can be. If you've ever had to deal with the DMV, the IRS, the EOC, OSHA, your county tax assessor, or any other governmental bureaucracy from the municipal to the federal level, you know it can be an absolute nightmare. Volumes of indecipherable laws and regulations, onerous and unnecessary requirements, reams of paperwork, and unctuous, often inept clerks and other functionaries whose only purpose in life, it would seem, is to be a gigantic pain in the ass. Surely it would be better for those people to find honest work in a productive endeavor that contributes in a positive way to the economy instead of adding to the tax burden of honest, productive, hard-working people. Sure, I'm down with that. Let the dynamics of the free enterprise system operate without the burdens of excessive taxation and government red tape. Just get the government out of our business. Yes. And then I start to think. While you don't want the government to interfere with business, you also don't want business to interfere with the government either. I mean, shouldn't the government control the cheats and polluters instead of the cheats and polluters controlling the government? As an individual, I don't have much power to stop large industrial operators from dumping toxins into the environment. But suppose the government, acting on my behalf, endeavors to stop industrial operators from fouling our air, land, and water with noxious and harmful chemicals. Now, wouldn't that be a reasonable use of governmental power? Funny now, when you think about it, but it was Richard Nixon who signed most of our federal environmental legislation into law. Richard Nixon, a Republican. My, how the party has changed. I was only in the 6th grade when Nixon was elected, but even then I followed political news, and I walked down to the local Republican campaign headquarters, and I bought a great big button to pin on my sweater that said, "Nixon's the one." Honest. I wore it to school. I guess you could say that even as a 12-year-old, I was a Republican. And, like all Republicans, even former ones, I believe in the power of the free market system. But there is one problem with the free market. People continually strive to subvert it. They establish monopolies and price-fixing schemes to blunt the forces of competition that would otherwise impel them to provide lower prices and superior service. Consider, for example, how the deregulation of the energy market enabled Enron to hold the state of California hostage to rolling blackouts in the early 2000s. They drove the price of electricity through the roof. And while Enron was gaming the system, Ken Lay was sitting in secret meetings with Dick Cheney to help shape the Republican agenda for a national energy policy. Then Cheney himself started blowing a smokescreen for Enron, claiming that the energy crisis was the result of environmental legislation that had prevented new power plants from being built. But isn't it amazing how the blackouts stopped when the indictment started and the government hauled the leadership of Enron into court? Dick Cheney. One more reason why I used to be a Republican. But just because the Republican Party has been corrupted, that doesn't mean the core tenet of conservatism isn't sound. Just keep the government out of our business. I say we could start by keeping the government out of our bedrooms. Our sex lives are our business, and the government should stay the hell out. But unfortunately, the Republican Party is now beholden to the religious right, which is one more reason why I used to be a Republican. In 1980, I was right-wing enough to vote for Ronald Reagan. And when Rush Limbaugh first came on the radio, I used to listen to him every day. But I grew weary of Rush in short order because of his constant pro-life screed. It seemed that most of his callers were just calling in to crow about their latest exploits on the picket lines. Listening to them, I knew that eventually someone would die at the hands of these zealots. I guess I was a bit naive in those days. I imagined that whenever one of those rabid pro-lifers finally did kill someone, it would expose the hypocrisy of those people and slow down the movement. Boy, did I miss the mark on that one. When I saw the pictures of little old women carrying picket signs saying, "God bless John Salvi," I was utterly shocked. And I began to realize that I have some profound differences of opinion with my erstwhile Republican brethren about a number of issues. My erstwhile brethren disparage the liberal practice of being generous with other people's money, and they in turn portray themselves as compassionate by being generous with other people's charity. But even at the risk of indulging a few welfare queens, I'd rather see a social safety net that is paid for by taxes than with charity. If it's paid for by taxes, at least we have a reasonable expectation it will be there. I'd rather see people stand in unemployment lines than in soup lines. I'd rather have our government protect the dignity of the working class than the financial security of wealthy CEOs. I'd rather have public funding pay for public schools for middle-class kids than to have public funding pay for private schools for children of privilege. I'd rather have citizens feel free enough to assert their rights when questioned by the police than to have police feel they have the right to shake down citizens without cause. That being said, I believe nonetheless that laws should be equally enforced, and that no one should be exempt from the law. And to hear them talk, my erstwhile Republican brethren believe that too. So it flat out irks me to see how the right-wingers embrace felonious thugs and liars like G. Gordon Liddy, Chuck Colson, Oliver North, and Scooter Libby as if they were martyrs or saints. I know a lot of people regard Oliver North as a patriot, but I think that even those people know in their hearts that North was just the fall guy who gave plausible deniability to the man who was selling missiles to Iran. But here again, this is why I used to be a Republican. I will say, however, that there are some Republican ideas that I can still agree with. For example, Republicans don't like so-called activist judges who interpret the law in a predictably partisan manner. On this issue, I concur wholeheartedly. And Republicans like guns a lot. Well, so do I, but I really don't think it's appropriate to bring them to political rallies. And when you get down to it, I don't think most Republicans are worth shooting, but I can think of some that I'd like to talk to with a baseball bat.